Item sorters. As Redstoners, we love them. There's nothing better than having your own system that stores and sorts your items for you. However, if you have a look at the one behind us, which has been the gold standard for a very long time, or I guess in this case, the diamond standard, it is fairly complicated. It's not the cheapest to build, and in that, there is some things that we can do to make it a bit better. And if I'm honest, that was my original thought, was just making that one a little bit better. And then I came up with this. This is definitely a bit strange. So what it is obviously minecart chests, and they're all going around in a circle. It's nice and relaxing to watch. It's kind of like one of those water sort of feature things that you get at the novelty shops. And it looks very interesting. So it's actually a 17 different item storage system. And if we have a look in here, it's empty, obviously, at the moment. All these have basically just one, or at least one item in each slot. And how it works out is that, very simply, these hoppers that are directed into them, as you'll see, basically will just chuck in whatever items that they can. And if they're locked up with all the different items, then they can only put in that kind of item. So if I was to say chuck in, let's say, wax blocks. So if I chuck in a whole bunch of these, then only the one that can actually pick up the wax block will actually pick it up. So it is an item sorting system and a fairly effective storage system. Now, how would something like this, though, compare to the old classic style that we used to know? Well, this door is obviously, as I said before, 17 different chests, and this is the equivalent, which is, yes, it's quite considerably larger. Obviously, I've spaced them out a little bit more. You can build these side by side. I prefer to have them spaced out just because it makes it a little bit more sort of, I don't know, industrial sort of looking. But having a look at it, in just the sheer size of the two, that's a lot cheaper. Not only that, this has obviously multiple different hoppers. Okay, that does have the actual minecarts, and they're not the cheapest, but they are cheaper than the hoppers. And this also has redstone components. It's using quartz. It's using whatever blocks that we have here. It is quite expensive to build something like this, whereas this is incredibly cheap. So what we have here is simply a chest for input, and wherever these have gone, somewhere around here. Obviously, we have the two hoppers at the back, and we have a lot of blocks. You don't need to use glass or any particular type of block. You can use the ice if you want to make them move a bit quicker, but aside from that, the only block that you really need to make sure that you're using is one piece of soul sand. Then you have, obviously, water source blocks all the way up along here. You have a sign, if you can just see it behind there, and there's obviously going to be another sign just behind this one. And aside from that is just a little bit more water here. That's basically it. I normally spend a lot more time explaining these sort of videos, but technically this isn't actually redstone. Yeah, this is the weirdest thing for me, is that this isn't actually a redstone device when you think about it, because there's no actual redstone components. The most that you could really sort of bank on is having hoppers. Maybe they're considered redstone components, but in reality, this isn't actually a redstone device. This is something that is not using redstone, which is a weird sort of concept. It's just basically working on a very simple locking system. So it's definitely very strange. Now, you can obviously build these a bit bigger. This is only a 17 chest system, so obviously there's room for improvement, and I have done that for us today. So if we go just over here, I have built something a tad bigger. This would be a 200 item storage system, which is, well, I should say 200 different types of item storage system, and it's quite large. Okay, I'll admit this one is a little bit insane. This one's kind of crazy, although I will say with the introduction of the new height limits that we're getting, this could be very useful for putting inside a skyscraper or something like that, where you don't necessarily want to be building something massive like the traditional sort of styles. And yeah, this is quite massive. On the flip side, it is extremely relaxing to watch. This is just gorgeous. Just have a look at this. I could sit there and literally watch this all day. It's just beautiful. It's just one of those beautiful things that you get in Minecraft where you could just sit there and watch it. And the best part is, obviously, is that it works in both Minecraft, Java, and Bedrock. There's not really going to be any difference. Probably what I would do in Bedrock is probably put, instead of having just a sign here, I'd probably also put a rail, maybe here next to it, or put the rail here and then put the sign next to it here. The main reason for it is that minecarts sort of have a bit of a despawning sort of issue if they're in a different chunk to where a minecart rail is, so try to put all of this inside one chunk, which you could easily sort of do. And that's basically it. It's just sit back, watch all your items flow in. It's quite nice. It's quite an interesting one. You know, if I'm quite honest, I'm really struggling to think about what I haven't covered yet, because basically there's not much to this to actually build. This is probably the most non-redstone person friendly farm that you can make. And not only that, it's extremely efficient, it's fun to watch, it could make builds very, very interesting to actually go inside and explore. But not only that, it's incredibly cheap. I mean, think about it. Okay, ignore the fact that I've actually used copper, because obviously copper's not the cheapest. These blocks aren't anything in particular, and the only thing on the inside is water. So that's pretty cheap. The only sort of downside is obviously the minecarts, which there is iron farms these days. That's something that you can really consider as to how cheap this is. And that would probably be one of those sort of things that you'd have to think about, actually having a decent sort of iron farm to be able to afford this many minecarts. The one thing I've been really thinking about with this farm is that surely someone at some stage has built an item sorter like this, right? Because when you think about it, these components aren't new. None of this is new. I mean, the newest part's probably the soul sand. That would be the newest part that came out a couple versions ago, but I mean, theoretically, this has been possible for a very, very long time. I'm sure someone would have come up with this by now, and I've struggled to find any videos that would basically show me something like this, so quite possibly this is the first one. I don't know. If I'm wrong, let me know in the description, but yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this one. It's very relaxing. I do love it quite a lot. Couldn't you just sit here all day and just watch this? It's such a modern design as well. It really fits into modern builds once and for all, because this one, as much as I do love the redstone, it is very industrial. It is something that you've got to build around. Like, you can't just go off and make a building and fit this inside it. Realistically, the only downside I can see to this sort of design is that you can't realistically have labels in things. So normally it would be quite common to get something like an item frame and put an item to show what's actually in this chest. However, with this, given that everything is constantly moving, there's not really an easy way to do that. I guess that's probably the only sort of downside, which is kind of a bit of a, you know, good and bad thing. I mean, you can just click on the actual chests to see what's in them, but it does take a bit more time for things to come through and that sort of thing. So you'd have to bear that in mind as a bit of a downside. But on the flip side though, it's a heck of a lot more smaller, it's a heck of a lot more cheaper, it fits into builds better, and basically, yeah, something like that takes a long time to build. Whereas this thing, it's more something that you could build in the first week or two of a Minecraft world rather than the first month. So let me know what you think, guys. It is pretty cool. I do like this quite a lot, and I just honestly enjoy watching it actually, but it's very distracting. It's one of those very satisfying Minecraft things. But I'll catch you guys in the next one, and see ya.